Welcome back to Small, Simple, Profitable. My name is Bob Goldman. The goal of this series is to equip you to start and run small businesses that are quickly profitable and simple to manage, whether you're doing business in your own country or in other countries. This episode will explore how to avoid 6 common startup mistakes. No one starts a business hoping it will fail. However, the facts show that most small business startups do fail. Why do so many startups fail? Is it possible there are some common patterns in those failures, some common mistakes that are being made over and over? I think the answer is yes. There are some common mistakes that get repeated by entrepreneurs in their startups. In this episode, I will describe 6 common mistakes that many entrepreneurs make, and I'll give you a clear path to avoid those mistakes so that your startup has a better chance of success. Let me start by comparing building on a firm foundation with building on a flawed foundation. Building on a firm foundation takes more planning, more time, and more hard work than just throwing something together. Regardless of what you're building, whether you're building the Great Wall of China or a home or a business startup, you need a firm foundation if you want to survive the storms. In 1 Corinthians 3:10, Paul said, "By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder." In Matthew 7:24 and 25, Jesus said, "Therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock." When you're designing a business startup, it's best if you assume that your business will experience some storms. If you build on a firm foundation, your business will probably survive those storms. If you build on a bad foundation, your business probably will not survive those storms. In business and in life, make sure you're building on a firm foundation, even though it takes more time and effort at first. The alternative to a firm foundation is a flawed and unstable foundation. Building on a flawed foundation is often the easiest and fastest way to start any building project. If you're in a hurry, you can just throw things together, and you won't have to do the hard work of creating a solid foundation first. However, an unstable foundation will always create problems later. In Matthew 7:26-27, Jesus said, "But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash." As I said before, when you're designing a business startup, you should assume that your business will experience some storms. If you build on a flawed foundation, your business will not survive those storms. Now, sometimes you can fix a business that was started on a flawed foundation, but often the only option is to close the business after you've lost a lot of money. In this episode, I will describe 6 flawed foundations that will cause your business startup to be unstable and probably fail. I'll also describe how those 6 flawed foundations can be improved so they become firm foundations on which you can build your startup. Let's look at flawed foundation number 1. Every startup begins with an intriguing business idea. If you don't think you have a great idea for a business, stop right there. Before you do anything else, make sure you're starting with a great business idea. A business startup is too hard to do successfully if you think the business idea itself isn't that great. However, basing your startup on an intriguing business idea without a viable business model is a very bad idea. If your business lacks a viable business model, you'll be building on a flawed foundation. Now, if you're not sure what's in a viable business model, please review Episode 1 in this small, simple, profitable series. Episode 1 describes the 4 elements of a viable business model. Here's what it sounds like to launch a startup on an intriguing business idea. I feel good about my business assumptions. This seems like a good business. I'm ready to launch. Here's what it sounds like to launch a startup on a viable business model. I've confirmed that I can persuade customers to pay enough for my solution that I can be profitable. Now I'm confident. Now I'm ready to launch. Notice that this second statement contains the 4 elements of a viable business model. It contains the idea of customers, the idea of solutions that customers actually want, the idea of persuading customers to buy, and the idea of realistic prices that will allow you to be profitable. You will recall from Episode 1 that these are the 4 elements of a viable business model: eager customers, attractive solutions, persuasive invitations, and realistic prices. If you launch as soon as you have an intriguing business idea, without taking the time to develop a viable business model, you're probably going to fail in your small business startup. An intriguing business idea by itself is an unstable foundation, a flawed foundation for starting a business. Every intriguing business idea needs a viable business model before you can be confident that it's really a good idea. When you develop your intriguing business idea into a viable business model, you're developing a firm foundation for launching that business. You need both when you're starting a new business. You do want to make sure that your business idea is intriguing enough, exciting enough to be worth doing, but that's not enough. You also need to be sure it can become a viable business that has eager customers, attractive solutions, persuasive invitations, and realistic prices. A business startup is building on a firm foundation when it develops an intriguing business idea into a viable business model. Now let's look at flawed foundation number 2. Every entrepreneur begins with a passion for the business. If you don't have any passion for your business idea, you should start exploring other businesses. I had a friend a few years ago who scheduled a meeting with me to talk about his business idea. Now, his idea was actually a great idea that had been proven to work in other countries and other cities, and would have been fairly easy to turn into a profitable business. However, I noticed he didn't seem very excited about it, so I stopped and asked him, "Would you enjoy the responsibility of coming to work and managing this business every day?" He thought about it and he said, "No, actually I would probably hate it." So I told him, "In that case, you shouldn't do this business. Someone else could do it because it's actually a great idea, but you shouldn't be the one to do it because you've just realized that you would hate it." A business startup is too much work for you to do if you don't have any passion for it. However, passion by itself is not enough of a reason to start a business. If you don't have a clear focus on customers, you're starting with a flawed foundation. Here are some of the things you'll have to be willing to do to find and serve customers. You have to be willing to hunt for potential customers, design products they would actually want, figure out how to persuade them to buy, Serve those customers over and over. Respond patiently when they're in a bad mood. Listen to their complaints and then use their complaints as feedback to improve your business. And you'll have to make tough choices about which customers to prioritize and which customers to ignore if you want your business to be consistently profitable. A small business is very customer intensive. Paying customers are the lifeblood of your business. This means you have to have a very clear focus on your customers in order to have a viable business. A business startup that doesn't have this customer focus is starting with a flawed foundation. Here's what it sounds like to launch a startup based only on having a passion for the business. I will do what I'm good at or what I'm passionate about. I hope customers and profits will come. Here's what it sounds like to add a customer focus to your passion for the business. I will design a solution that customers want and will pay a reasonable price for. Now I'm confident that customers and profits will come. If you launch your startup with a passion for the business, that's great, but it isn't enough. You also have to have a clear customer focus. If you launch your startup with passion, but you don't have a clear focus on customers, then your business startup will probably fail. A business startup is building on a firm foundation when it combines a passion for the business with a strong customer focus. Let's look at flawed foundation number 3. Every startup requires a process for developing products and services. Without products and services to offer to potential customers, you don't have a business. However, if customers don't want your products, then you're building on a flawed foundation. Your startup will probably fail if you have products that you love but your customers don't want. Here's what it sounds like to launch a startup with only a product development focus. I will focus on developing a great solution. I hope to convince customers to want my solution and be willing to pay for it. Here's what it sounds like to cultivate customer demand as you develop your product. I need to interact with potential customers as I'm developing my solution to make sure whatever I develop is something they really want and will pay for. Without customer demand, the products you develop are useless. Developing a product that no one wants is a waste of time in a business startup. If a startup wastes too much time and money on a product no one wants, it could actually cause the business to fail. The most successful business startups make sure their product development is closely linked with real feedback from potential customers. The best way to develop great products that customers actually want is to interact with those customers while you're developing your products. And then keep listening to your customers as you're selling to them and serving them. Keep adjusting your products and services in response to customer demand, because customer demand will change and evolve. You can't get lazy about your products. Don't assume that once you develop your products, you're done and you don't have to change. The fact is, a business startup must keep adapting, keep adjusting, keep modifying what it offers as it continues to interact with and serve customers. A business startup is building on a firm foundation when it combines product development with the ability to continually adapt to customer demand for its products. Let's look at flawed foundation number 4. It's common for business startups to focus on the manager's perspective of a business. The manager approach is about managing what is currently happening, managing the tangible, managing the daily business activities. However, you have a flawed foundation if your business does not also have an entrepreneur's perspective to go with a manager's perspective. The entrepreneur approach is about managing what is not yet happening, managing the intangible, managing the possibilities. If your startup has a manager approach but doesn't also have an entrepreneur approach, it will probably fail. Here's what it sounds like to launch a startup with only a manager approach. I just need to manage the daily business activities. That should be enough to make the business successful. Here's what it sounds like to add an entrepreneur approach to your startup. I also need to find customers, solve their problems, convince them to buy, and make sure we can be profitable. Notice that this second statement repeats the 4 elements of a viable business model, just expressed a little differently. The most successful business startups respect what the manager role brings to the business, and they also respect what the entrepreneur role brings to the business. Successful startups appreciate the manager's ability to focus on what is currently happening, to manage the tangible daily business activities, to serve current customers, to bring order to the chaos and ambiguity of a startup. Successful startups also appreciate the entrepreneur's ability to focus on what is not yet happening, to cast a larger vision, to pursue new possibilities, to explore new opportunities, to bring in new customers. A business startup is building on a firm foundation when it combines the best of the manager approach and the best of the entrepreneur approach. Let's look at flawed foundation number 5. Every startup needs income to be a successful business. Income is what you get when your customers pay you for your products and services. Income is sometimes called sales or revenue. There are more specific accounting terms that we could get into, but we don't need them right now. For now, we just need to understand that income, sales, and revenue are all terms that refer to the total income a business receives before any of the expenses have been paid. If your startup focuses on income without also thinking about profit, you're starting with a flawed foundation. Now, profit is also known as net income and net revenue. It's what's left over after the business has paid all of its expenses. It's possible for a business to have a lot of income and still be losing money. All it takes is for your business expenses to be greater than your income. That's why it's important to focus on both income and profit in a business startup. You do need money coming in to have a successful business, but you also have to have enough to cover your expenses with some money left over. Here's what it sounds like to launch a startup with only an income focus. My business is making a lot of money. Therefore, my business is doing well. When an entrepreneur says their business is making money, they're often referring to their total sales, their total income, without taking their expenses into account. If a business has expenses that are greater than its total income, that business is actually losing money. So it's possible for a business to be making money and also losing money because it has income without profit. Here's what it sounds like to add a profit focus to your startup. My business is making enough money to cover its expenses and generate a small profit. Therefore, my business is doing well. Business startups need to make sure that income is high enough and expenses are low enough that there's some profit left over. That's the benefit of adding a profit focus to an income focus. If you can't tell the difference between income and profit, you're building on a flawed foundation. Successful entrepreneurs keep the total financial picture in view. They know the difference between income, expenses, and profit. They worry about their income, they worry about their expenses, and they worry about making a profit. Successful entrepreneurs worry a lot. A business startup is building on a firm foundation when it combines an income focus with a profit focus. Finally, let's look at flawed foundation number 6. Every startup needs a certain amount of growth to be a successful business. However, there's a temptation among startups to see growth as the answer to every problem. If your startup only focuses on growth without also thinking about profit, you're building on a flawed foundation. Growing your business without seeing any profits is another term for losing money faster. Growing a business is hard work. If you're working hard and you're still losing money, you're definitely building on a flawed foundation. Here's what it sounds like to launch a startup with only a growth focus. My business is growing, therefore my business is doing well. Unfortunately, this usually doesn't work out. If you're counting on growth to solve your profitability problems, it usually won't. Typically, if you're losing money as a small business and you double in size, you'll just lose money twice as fast. Now, there are some business models where you have to reach a certain size in order to recoup your investments and make a profit. For example, if your business is developing innovative new technology or new software, you may have large research and development costs before you can build your product and start to get some income. So that's an example of upfront development costs that require a certain level of sales or business growth before you can make a profit. However, most businesses that are losing money when they're small will follow the more typical pattern of losing more money when they grow. Here's what it sounds like to add a profit focus to a growth-focused startup. My business makes a profit while it's growing. My business even makes a profit without growing. Therefore, my business is doing well. In most business startups, making a profit is not an accident. You have to be intentional about making a profit, whether or not you're growing. If you can't tell the difference between growing a business and making a profit, then you're building on a flawed foundation. Successful entrepreneurs understand when the business needs to grow, and they also understand how to make a profit. If you can combine the ability to grow a business startup while making a profit, whether you're small or growing, you have a firm foundation. A business startup is building on a firm foundation when it combines a growth focus with a profit focus. Let's review what we discussed in this episode. We looked at 6 flawed foundations for starting a business. Those 6 flawed foundations are 6 common startup mistakes. And we looked at how those 6 flawed foundations could be turned into firm foundations. For this review, let's combine those 6 flawed foundations into a comprehensive picture of how to design a startup that will probably fail. Then we'll combine the 6 firm foundations into a comprehensive picture of how to design a startup that will probably succeed. You can design a startup to fail if you have an intriguing business idea without a viable business model, a passion for the business without a clear focus on customers, products you're proud of that customers don't want, good management of daily business activities without finding and persuading customers to buy, and business income and business growth without making a profit. On the other hand, you can design a startup to succeed if you have an intriguing business idea developed into a viable business model, a passion for the business combined with a clear focus on customers, products you're proud of that customers have confirmed they really want, good management of daily business activities while also finding and persuading customers to buy, and business income and business growth while making a profit. This is how you turn the 6 flawed foundations into 6 firm foundations for starting a business. If you build on these 6 firm foundations, your startup will probably succeed. I hope this episode has equipped you with a better understanding of the 6 common mistakes that entrepreneurs make. And I hope you're better equipped to avoid those mistakes by turning those flawed foundations into firm foundations for your startup. In coming episodes, we will look at a structured process and practical tools for transforming an intriguing business idea into a profitable business model that you are actually ready and willing to launch. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.